So here we are under the van, and I'm working on developing a support for the Greywater Tank. We have three of these horizontal members that we're going to connect to. This is just one, this is the middle one. And instead of using riv nuts to connect our support brackets, I'm going to use a piece of unistrut across here. And to hold the unistrut on, I'm putting in these carriage bolts. And the carriage bolts are being installed through these larger holes. I've got a piece of wire attached to a carriage bolt, and I feed it through and down the hole. I'm going to drill a new hole here. I'll feed it through there, pull it back down, and then I've got some little plastic keepers that I put in behind these washers. The washer and the nut will come off. They're just in there to set the square head of the carriage bolt into the metal. So I use a wrench to tighten that and pull it down tight, and then there's a plastic keeper that will stay there, so when I undo that and put the unistrut on, these bolts won't push back up inside this hollow space. So it's a little tough to film in here, but what I've done is I've got a piece of wood that I brought in earlier, and I marked the location of all the major holes, and then I marked where my two holes are going to go. So I'm going to take back this nut off. I'm going to put the piece of wood back on here. I'll just loosely tighten the nut back up, and that'll help me locate this hole. And then when it comes to drilling the unistrut, I'll have this pattern that will already have the hole spaced in the right spot. So I'm going to shut the video off, back this off. I'll try to take a picture or two before I drill my hole, and I'll come back to you. Okay, so here we've got the pattern bolted back in place with this bolt, and all I'm going to do is mark my hole here with the drill. I'll take it off, finish my hole, put the rust paint on, and then put the bolt back in. So we've drilled a hole. These are 5/16 bolts, carriage bolts. I've drilled a 3/8 hole here. I have pre-strung the wire with the bolt attached, and now I feel like a real YouTuber because I'm trying to do this with one hand. So I'm pushing the bolt up through, and let's see if we can get it to come. Oh, look at that. Perfect. So then we can stretch on our keeper and our nut and our bolt and pull that in tight. I'll do that off camera because I can't do it with one hand. Okay, so there we are with our first cross piece with the two carriage bolts all set for when our unistrut gets here. So it looks like we may have run into a snag here. This is the rearmost horizontal brace of the three. And right above this hole is a factory tie down, and it sticks down into that brace. So I don't think I'm going to be able to get my bolt to pass through there. So I may have to come up with a different solution. I'm going to go up above and see if that tie down has any access from the top. So here we are above inside the van. That's where the factory tie down is, and this is where that rib travels, and we're trying to drill a hole kind of here, and there's some sort of structure underneath this to give it some strength that is likely getting in our way. So as it turned out, we were actually okay. I was able to go in through this hole rather than the middle hole. In the middle hole, there's a barrier right here, but if going in this hole, I was able to come out and get my bolt to flip around. So we're actually okay. And now all three sets of studs are in place. So this is our Greywater tank. There was a previous video where we went to the manufacturer and watched them put some of the fittings on. This tank is going to go on the driver's side, underneath the van. Up here is the front. This is the back. The shower is going to drain into this end, and the kitchen sink is going to drain into this end. It's got an automatic dump valve, so we'll be able to push a button inside and have the gray water come out. The 3 green tape lines represent where there are struts underneath the van, and that's how where we're going to be supporting it. And you'll see later in this video where those how I'm connecting to those. This roll of tape represents where the tank monitor is going to go. I'm going to drill a hole and place the tank monitor in there. But before I do that, I thought I should bench test the tank monitors, make sure they're working. So in the van, we're going to have the Cerbo GX monitoring the electrical system, and as a bonus, also monitoring our tank levels. This will be the tank level monitor for the Greywater tank, and this one will be for the freshwater tank. I don't know if you can see that. As I move the float valve down on the Greywater tank, the fill level should be changing. It's dropping down, and as it goes up towards the top, as it gets close to the top, it turns red to let you know that it's getting close to full. And interestingly, the freshwater tank, as it gets closer to empty, turns red to let you know that it's getting close to empty. So a little bit of a change in plan. I moved the hole forward just because the wires from here and from here will come up into the van at the front here more than at the back. So I drilled what was an 1.25-inch hole, I believe, just big enough for the float to get through. And so the way this goes together is there's a gasket, and it comes with machine screws, but I need to use these threaded screws, just like a wood screw, to grab the tank, because I couldn't reach in to place a nut in here at the front of the tank. Interestingly, this gasket is not symmetrical, and there is one set of holes that are farther apart. I think they line up with the ones that are on either side of the wire here. So I'll put that together and I'll get back to you. What I've done is I've drilled one hole, and what I typically do is I'll assemble it with the screw in that hole to hold it in place, and then I'll drill the rest of the holes so that it doesn't move around. So now I've got one screw in, I've got the gasket lined up underneath. This is just not really tight so that I can move things if I need to, but I'll put one more screw in and then I'll finish them all off. So there you go. I've just used 5 of these number 10 stainless steel metal screws to hold it down. I have just kind of tightened them kind of medium tight. I don't want to strip the screws out. If this tank leaks a little bit, it's really not a big deal. It's just the Greywater tank. Anyway, we'll come back to this when we get our unistruts, and we can hang it underneath the van. So our Superstrut came in. That's what this stuff is. It also goes by the name of unistrut. It's kind of a U-shaped metal channel, primarily used for holding up industrial equipment or hanging pipes and stuff from ceilings. But I'm going to use it to hang our, this is the wastewater tank underneath the van. So the way this works is it comes with these are kind of twist-in T-nuts. I've got one in place over here. It's got a pretty strong spring, so I won't be able to put it in by with one hand, I don't think, but you just kind of compress the spring and push it in underneath these lips. And then we've got 1/2-inch threaded rod that screws down in through it. When the threaded rod bottoms out on the steel, it pushes up on the nut, which locks it in place. And then you can put a square nut, another nut, and a square washer and another nut on. And I'll show you what that all looks like. This one over here is kind of complete. So the tank is sitting in its finished position. We've got the unistrut on the top. This is the T-nut inside with a square washer and then a regular nut. And those two nuts work against each other to squeeze it against this, the bottom side of this unistrut. And then we've got a threaded rod. I've just covered it in a piece of PEX pipe to keep it from abrading against the side of the tank. Probably not necessary because there's actually a space back there. And this is 1/2-inch PEX pipe over top of a 1/2-inch bolt, and it was not the easiest thing to do. I don't recommend you try to do that. I have to do it 4 more times because I can't leave this tank halfway done, but I wouldn't recommend you do that. Then at the bottom, there's 2 nuts and 2 washers that counteract against each other and hold up another piece of unistrut on the bottom. Ultimately, when this is in place, I'll probably run a strap down from screwed into here and screwed into here just with some self-tapping screws to keep the tank from moving forward and backwards because it's kind of slippery in there. And I'll probably just put a rubber filler in here to help spread the weight so it's not all pushing just on those 2 square washers. So there'll be a repeat of that here. Of course, they go that way, and these holes are pre-drilled for the studs that I've already put in the underside of the van. And then there'll be another set back here. So here you see the T-nut in the unistrut. It has 2 little ears that kind of fit in around underneath the track here, and when you that spring kind of helps hold it in place. And so in my situation, I'm putting this square nut on top, square washer I mean, and then I pre-loaded the washer and the nut on the threaded rod so I don't have to bring them down from the far end, and they just kind of fit in and thread into that insert. And you want it to go right down I want it to go right down tight against the bottom of the unistrut, and then just tighten up this nut, and I'll use a wrench to tighten that up, and the 2 nuts will purchase against each other and we'll have it locked up. So a few last minute changes. I'm just getting ready to fit the brackets under the van. I got rid of the square washers up at the top here. They were kind of interfering. They were so deep, they were pushing against the corner of the tank, and even the adding of the rubber wasn't enough space to make room for it. So I took those out, regular round washer here, and I cut the bottom of the bracket with a little relief cut here so that I can get a wrench on the bottom to tighten these up. Putting the nut fit between the 2 ledges here, but I wouldn't have been able to get a wrench in there. So now with these cuts, I can get a wrench in there and tighten that up when it's underneath the tank, underneath the van. So we're under the van. I've installed the first of 3 brackets. They're held on to these studs that I've put in. You saw in the previous video. I didn't take the nuts off. I left the original nuts on and added new ones underneath. And that was simply to allow water that will inevitably get in there to get out. I didn't want to create a seal and lock water up inside those struts. So I just left the original nuts on, added some others, and that's the setup. So I just got the 3 brackets installed here. I did just notice that on the middle bracket at the end closest to the diesel tank, that's probably a little too close here. It probably will actually hit, so I'm going to round this, shorten this little section and round it off so that it doesn't wear against the tank there. So that's the first dry fit of the tank under the van. This is from the front looking back. The middle brace is just got some paint drying because I had to reshape that end. I'll grab a picture from the other end. And this is from the rear of the van, looking forward. This is where the automatic dump valve is going to be, and the inlet for the sink is going to be up here.